Welcome back to another episode of the Outdoor Adventures podcast here on Brownfield. I'm Brent Barnett, and this week we head off to Wisconsin. We're talking with Josh Spiegel, a wildlife biologist with the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. Josh, how's it going here today?
Oh, it's going great, Brent. Thank you for having me on. Appreciate you reaching out again.
Yeah, thanks for being here. It's been about a year ago this time that you joined the show, and we talked about an elk hunting opportunity in the state of Wisconsin. Well, we're revisiting that topic here today. Before we get to it, you might just tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and some of the work that you do there with Wisconsin DNR.
Yeah, thanks, Brent. Appreciate it. So, yeah, like you mentioned, Josh Spiegel here. I'm stationed out of the Hayward DNR office, kind of the northern third, northwest Wisconsin. Kind of tied to our northern elk herd, our kind of traditional Clam Lake area. I'm one of two biologists, kind of at my position in that sense. We also have a central herd biologist tied out of the Black River Falls area that work with our central elk herd. So her and I work a lot together. Christina Kazuski, if you ever hear her name come across the airwaves, newspapers, etc. So we work in tandem a lot, doing the field implementation related to Wisconsin elk. We also handle a lot of the statewide stuff, the management plan, kind of media outreach, etc., related to elk here in the state of Wisconsin. So get to do a lot of the really fun stuff on the ground, physically working with elk habitat, doing the surveys, all that stuff in the field, as well as like we're going to talk about today here, working with the elk hunters, the implementation of the elk hunting season. I'm extremely fortunate. I'm one of the individuals that gets to reach out and let the lucky winners know that they've been selected. So that's definitely a highlight when it comes to my job.
Yeah, and just here recently, Josh, Wisconsin DNR announcing that 8 Wisconsin residents have won a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to take part in the 2024 elk hunting season. So let's just talk about that latest announcement and just how big of a deal this is.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I mean, for anyone in tune to the hunting world, these limited draw tags, right? They have a lot of interest. It's kind of the mystique of, am I going to get drawn? Should I go down to the gas station and buy a lottery ticket or put in for this drawing? Which one has the better odds type thing. So it's really cool to be a part of that. We're fortunate this year that we are opening our elk hunt in the central zone as well. So like you mentioned, the 8 tags are 8 successful applicant drawings that were pulled. 4 were for a migrator area, which has been consistent long term, and then 4 for the new zone, kind of the central part of the state. So these 8 hunters get this once in a lifetime opportunity to pursue elk in 2 different ranges now here in the state of Wisconsin.
I feel like when elk get brought up, Wisconsin maybe isn't at the top of the list when you hear that, but maybe just talk about the history of the elk season in the state and how this has all come about, Josh.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. When people across the nation are looking into elk, you're looking into the Colorados, Montanas, Idahos, etc., Utah, chasing those big mountain pigs out there. But Wisconsin, we've got our elk here. Obviously, they were native to the greater Wisconsin area and upper Midwest type area in general. So really a lot of cool work has gone into the reintroduction, bringing the elk back, and now being at that point of sustainability. We're continuing to grow the population, but we're at the point where we can offer hunting opportunity in both of our herds. So that's really cool to have that option for our hunters of the state of Wisconsin here as well. So one thing that is really cool and makes a tie is traditionally the residents of Wisconsin are very common elk hunters out west. Wisconsin has a really good elk hunting contingent that goes out to the mountain states and pursues elk. So we do have a lot of elk hunting interest in the state of Wisconsin. And I think it's just tapping into that maybe that drive that, hey, I can do this, an hour or 2 from home type thing versus driving out to the mountains.
And like you said, 8 winners here. And I believe if I read your website correctly, over 20,000 applications came in. What's the goal moving forward, Josh? Do you think we'll see the number expand on the number of winners for this season?
So I think there's a little bit of unknown with the expansion. I think there is a little bit of hesitancy from some hunters just because they see that as, hey, there's only 4, 8 tags the last couple years here. I don't know if my odds are good enough, so I'm going to wait till there's a higher number type thing. But realistically, talking to a lot of other Eastern elk management states, so states like Kentucky, Pennsylvania, Arkansas, they all have elk hunting seasons, and they see a lot less average applicants putting into their systems. Even Minnesota, our neighbor next door, their applicants appear to be less than what we're seeing here in Wisconsin. So I think there's still a ton of interest. You talked about the 20,000 number. So this would be our seventh elk hunting season. So the last 6 years, we've been averaging right around 25,000 applicants, and we're right about that same point this year. About 25.5 was our application number. Last year we were down around 21,000. So we are back up to our kind of long-term average, but I do anticipate that'll start increasing a little bit as well.
So, like you mentioned, two zones here for this go around: the Black River Elk Zone and the Clam Lake Elk Zone. Could you maybe describe those areas for the listeners and just some of the terrain and habitat they could encounter if they're ever in that area of the state?
Yeah. So first of all, we're talking about this from a strong hunting perspective. Obviously the drawn hunters and whatnot. But I highly encourage, if someone gets the opportunity to come see some elk in the state of Wisconsin, I'm always available as a servant to the public to point people in the direction of where they could find elk sign, etc. But yeah, our two distinct elk ranges, our kind of long-term one, the Clam Lake Elk Management Zone, is nestled in more of northwest Wisconsin. So if you're familiar with the town of Hayward, Park Falls, even Ashland, something like that, the Lake Superior shoreline. The northern part of our zone is about an hour south of the Schwamigan Bay Lake Superior shoreline. So kind of nestled in up there. We got about 16,000 or 1,600 square miles of elk range in the greater area. And we do see elk across that entire range. It's a lot of denser forest, primarily aspen stands, kind of some mixed openings, that kind of stuff, mixed lakes, riverways, etc. So you get into the northern side, you're going to see some more of the rolling hills, some more oak, stuff like that. But it's primarily lower hardwoods, northern hardwood stands, aspen, etc. When you transition to the central part, so the Black River Falls area, it's going to be a little bit north and east of La Crosse, Wisconsin, so right on the riverway there between Wisconsin and Minnesota, and then kind of south of Eau Claire, bigger city in western Wisconsin. That Black River area, that's going to be a lot of oak, scrub oak, kind of the edge of bluff country, kind of some mixed open ground, pine forest, stuff like that. So a little bit more drier ground, rolling hills type area. So a little bit different component, but they still do have a lot of that aspen component, some of the wet ground, etc. there as well.
Let's set the stage for this season. When do things open up for the 2024 elk season? And are the hunters on their own, or are they with a guide? What's that look like?
Yeah, so great question. So our elk hunting season opens the nearest Saturday to October 15th. So this year that falls October 12th. It's going to run for about a month. So it's going to end I believe that's the second Sunday in November. And then it closes for about a month and opens for another 9-day period in December there. So all the dates and everything is online. I believe this year, if I look right, it's right above the computer here. So the season is October 12th to November 10th, and then runs December 12th to December 20th. So kind of a split season framework there. But hunters with an active tag, they're able to use any weapon that's available to harvest a white-tailed deer. So they could go with a traditional bow, crossbow, archery equipment of some kind, crossbow, muzzleloader, firearm, shotgun, centerfire rifle, whatever it might be. They're allowed to harvest that elk with. So similar patterns there. And then as for the guiding side of things, we kind of leave that up to the elk hunter. Some people are a little more comfortable in the woods doing the scouting, the effort. Some people just don't have the time to do that. So they've drawn this once in a lifetime tag. It's maybe quite a commitment to them. So they're going to work with someone locally. We do have a few guides and outfitters Can't speak to the central zone as much with this being brand new, but I assume some folks are going to get into that world as well. We see a lot of our bear and deer hunting guides, some of even our fishing guides that might have an interest in that, kind of get into that guiding world. So here in the state of Wisconsin, you only need a guide license that's not determinative by the species of pursuit. So anyone with a guiding license or has interest in getting a guide license, as long as they do their homework, background, paperwork, etc., they can have that opportunity. So we do see some of our elk hunters getting into that realm as well, and then we see some of them doing it the old-fashioned way, hoofing through the woods, coming up a couple weekends a month, getting used to the landscape, and then ultimately finding the elk, finding their patterns, etc. So it's pretty cool to talk to every hunter and see how they determine to go about their hunt.
I read on your website that all winners are required to take part in a Wisconsin elk hunter education course before obtaining their license. So, could you describe what that class covers and kind of the purpose there?
Yeah, exactly. So, 100%. So that's actually some of our state statute language there. Legislature put into effect with the elk hunting season that we really wanted our hunters to understand not only how they're pursuing elk, but why. So the regulation behind it, what you can and can't do, etc. So that's definitely part of the course. We bring in a few law enforcement officers, some of our DNR wardens here in the state of Wisconsin, as well as U.S. Forest Service law enforcement, etc. So up here in northern Wisconsin, we have a large contingent of U.S. Forest Service property. So they've kind of got a unique set of rules on their property. We bring in a law enforcement agent to speak with folks on that. And then the other part of it is just understanding elk, the biology of elk, the history of elk in Wisconsin. So these hunters can appreciate the pursuit of those elk. They get a full understanding of the management that we do, what the stakeholders in the state of Wisconsin have put forward to have this opportunity in front of them. So it's a really cool day. I've yet to hear a hunter say that it was, a quote unquote waste of time or something. They're usually extremely engaged, and that only leads to more questions. So it's a really fun day to interact, and then ultimately make sure they feel comfortable out there in the landscape with only 4, 8 tags in the given year here. They've got a pretty strong microscope on them. So if those hunters are pursuing elk legally, it turns into a really fun opportunity. If they were to do something wrong and kind of have that the breaking of regulation, something like that, it's pretty easy for folks to get pigeonholed at that point. And we don't want any of our hunters to end up in that seat. We'd rather have them make sure they fully understand the process before they kind of have to question themselves or make that type of decision in the field.
How have the seasons gone over in these recent years? Have you seen some success? Have hunters been able to harvest a bull or two?
Yeah, yep. So we've been floating right around 100% success rate. You're never going to be perfectly at 100, but I would say that every hunter that's pursued elk here in the state of Wisconsin has had the opportunity to harvest an elk. Some of them maybe have been a little more selective, passing on some animals, and then ultimately don't have a harvest. But I think the last 2 years for sure, we've had our hunters tag out. So that's been 4 a year each of the last 2 years. The year prior, we had one hunter that did not. It's been a mixture of younger bulls, older bulls, maybe kind of that raghorn spike class, and then up to mature bulls. So in the state of Wisconsin, a legal bull is anything with at least 6 inches of antler or more. So anything from a spike bull all the way up to a 6x6, 7x7, something like that. So hunter success has been really good, and the hunter stories that we've had, it doesn't cease to amaze me. You'd think, hey, we drew 4 people, we drew 8 people, all these people are hunters, right? They have interest in doing this, but every one of them has a unique story or a unique way that they've gone about it. Last year was a really cool one. So last year we had our first traditional bow harvest, as well as our first youth hunter harvest. So 2 really cool stories. That was of 4 tags. So on 4 tags, we had one traditional longbow hunter and then one youth hunter, 16-year-old female. Made a harvest there, a successful harvest. So really, really cool to see the different dynamics between all the different hunters.
Wow, that's really cool. I can't imagine trying to harvest an elk with traditional archery equipment. What a feat that is. That, I mean, that's
Right.
bragging. That's bragging rights for the rest of your hunting life.
Right. And the story behind it, the hunter himself, him and I have talked numerous times now. The other thing is you get to build these really cool relationships. That particular hunter, we spoke on numerous occasions. He did a ton of homework. So like any traditional archery hunter, not only was he proficient in the use of the equipment, but also the understanding of the bounds. He's shooting up to maybe 30 yards at the furthest, but ideally in that 15 to 20-yard range to feel most comfortable. So he's putting in a ton of effort to get on top of those elk. And as luck would have it, he went out opening day to a place that he had been seeing elk on a regular basis. And the day prior, he actually ran into a bunch of grouse hunters in the area, and he thought that they blew up his hunting opportunity. So he was scrambling, going to spots B, C, D, E, F, etc. Like most hunters do, and ultimately kind of fell back on a tree stand that he had placed well prior in an area that he knew elk traveled, and kind of used it as a night to kind of reset, hey, what am I going to do tomorrow? I'm not going to burn a night, but I'm not going to go to my best spot. And lo and behold, had a nice mature bull come walk right underneath him and made a phenomenal 15-yard shot. And he kind of said it too. He goes, I was dumbfounded. I was looking at the elk. He goes, I still didn't believe that I had an elk in front of me. So really cool how those stories unfold.
Yeah, ice in his veins. What a shot.
Right.
That's great.
Right.
Josh, great conversation here. How can listeners get more information about the elk management in the state of Wisconsin?
Yeah, so the easiest way is to go on the Wisconsin DNR website. We've got a search bar up top. Just type in elk in Wisconsin or elk, and it's going to bring up kind of our elk pages. We've got 3 main pages. One is called Elk in Wisconsin. That's all the management, the history, kind of our goals and targets related to elk. Our second page is kind of our elk reintroduction effort. So the real early stages, what we had to do to get elk on the landscape, the effort, everything we went involved. Then the final page is elk hunting, or hunting of elk in the state of Wisconsin there. And that's a lot of what the valuable information for someone wanting to apply for elk. So now through the new application process, elk hunters have to either apply for the Clam Lake zone or the Black River zone. So there's information regarding both of those land types, that forest type we talked about earlier, what they can see and expect on the landscape, and really break down kind of the season dates, what they could expect if they were to be lucky enough to draw, and then some of the past hunter successes as well. So there's some pictures on there kind of on a yearly breakdown where hunters can kind of relate to some of the previous hunters as well.
Josh, thanks for coming on the show. After the season concludes this year, we'll have to have you back on and recap all the highlights.
That sounds great, Brent. Really appreciate it. And thank you very much for spreading the word of elk in Wisconsin.
We really appreciate your time. Again, that's Josh Spiegel, wildlife biologist with the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, right here on Brownfield's Outdoor Adventures. I'm Brent Barnett. Thanks for watching the show this week.